Admiral Zeketh stood before the massive holographic display showing the third planet from a yellow star. His 6 arms moved across the control panels with practiced ease, pulling up data streams about the world below. The readings showed a planet covered mostly in water, with large land masses populated by billions of primitive creatures. "Another easy conquest," Zeketh muttered to his aide, a younger Krillian named Voss. "The inhabitants barely understand space travel. Most still use chemical rockets that can barely escape their own gravity well." Voss nodded, his scaled head bobbing in agreement. "Intelligence reports show they call themselves humans. They fight each other constantly over resources, territory, and belief systems. A divided species will fall quickly to our coordinated assault." The Krillian Empire had conquered 47 worlds over the past 3 centuries. Each victory had followed the same pattern. Superior technology overwhelmed primitive defenses. Divided populations surrendered rather than face total destruction. Within a decade, conquered species became productive workers in the vast Krillian war machine. Earth would be no different. Zeketh pulled up tactical assessments from their long-range scouts. Human military technology lagged centuries behind Krillian capabilities. Their fastest aircraft could not break the sound barrier consistently. Their most powerful weapons were crude nuclear devices that produced more radiation than focused destruction. Their space presence consisted of a few orbital stations and primitive satellites. "Begin Phase 1, Zeketh commanded. "Deploy probe squadrons to major population centers. Let them see our ships but do not engage. Fear will weaken their resolve before we begin the real assault." Across Earth, the appearance of sleek black vessels in the skies above major cities caused widespread panic. News networks broadcast shaky footage of ships that seemed to ignore the laws of physics, hovering silently above New York, London, Tokyo, and dozens of other cities. Military forces scrambled jets to intercept, but the alien craft simply phased out of existence whenever human aircraft approached. Within 48 hours, every major world leader received the same message, transmitted directly to their communication networks, despite military-grade encryption. The message was simple and devastating in its arrogance. "People of Earth, you are now subjects of the Krillian Empire. Surrender your military forces and governmental control within 72 hours. Compliance will result in peaceful integration into our civilization. Resistance will result in total conquest and the destruction of your major population centers. You have been warned." In emergency sessions around the globe, world leaders struggled to comprehend the scope of the threat. Military advisors presented grim assessments of human defensive capabilities against technology that seemed impossibly advanced. Fear spread through populations as citizens demanded answers their governments could not provide. But in a small office in Colorado Springs, buried deep within Cheyenne Mountain, someone was working on a very different kind of response. Colonel Sarah Chen had been studying the alien probe footage for 18 hours straight. Empty coffee cups surrounded her workstation as she ran analysis after analysis on the limited data available. While politicians debated surrender terms and generals calculated impossible odds, Chen focused on something everyone else had missed. The alien ships were impressive, certainly. They moved without visible propulsion, seemed immune to radar detection when they chose to be, and demonstrated clear technological superiority. But Chen had spent 15 years analyzing enemy capabilities for the U.S. Air Force. She knew that technological advantage meant nothing if you did not understand your enemy's true capabilities. And these aliens had made their first mistake. They had underestimated human intelligence. Chen pulled up the energy signature data from the probe encounters. Every time human aircraft approached, the alien vessels had phased out of detection. But they had not simply vanished. Chen's instruments had detected minute gravitational fluctuations that suggested the ships were actually shifting into parallel dimensional space, not becoming truly invisible. More importantly, The phase shift required tremendous energy expenditure, energy that left detectable traces in the electromagnetic spectrum. Chen had identified a narrow frequency band where the alien ships remained partially visible even during phase transition. "Got you," she whispered, highlighting the frequency data on her screen. Chen knew that finding the aliens was only the beginning. Human weapons technology was indeed centuries behind Krillian capabilities. But humans had something the aliens clearly did not expect. They had Sarah Chen, and Sarah Chen had never met a problem she could not solve. Growing up in a small town in Wyoming, Chen had been the daughter of an electronics repair shop owner and a high school physics teacher. While other kids played video games, she had spent her afternoons taking apart radio equipment and building her own communication devices. By age 12, she was helping her father repair complex electronics. By 16, she had earned her amateur radio license and was communicating with operators on the other side of the world. The Air Force had recruited her straight out of MIT, where she had earned dual degrees in electrical engineering and theoretical physics. Her specialty was electronic warfare and signal intelligence. But her real talent was seeing patterns that others missed. In 15 years of service, she had never failed to find a way through enemy defenses. The Krillians were about to learn that human ingenuity could be far more dangerous than human technology. Chen began working on modifications to standard military radar systems. If she could tune them to the specific frequency where alien ships remained detectable, human forces could track the vessels even during phase transitions. It would not be easy, and it would require coordinating with radar installations worldwide, but it was possible. As she worked through the night, Chen received word that the UN Security Council was preparing a surrender declaration. World leaders had decided that resistance was futile against such overwhelmingly superior technology. They would formally surrender to the Krillian Empire within 24 hours. Chen paused in her work and looked at the countdown timer on her screen. 23 hours and 14 minutes until humanity gave up without a fight. She opened a secure communication channel to General Morrison, her direct superior at NORAD. "General, I need immediate authorization to coordinate with Allied radar installations worldwide. I believe I have found a way to track the alien vessels." Morrison's voice crackled through the secure line. "Colonel, our orders are to stand down. The President is announcing surrender in 18 hours. "Sir, with respect, what if we do not have to surrender? What if these aliens are not as invincible as they want us to believe?" There was a long pause on the line. Chen could hear urgent conversations in the background as world leaders debated humanity's fate. "Colonel," Morrison finally said, "you have 12 hours. If you can give me something concrete, something that proves we have a fighting chance, I will take it to the President personally. But understand the stakes. If you are wrong, billions of people may die because we chose to fight instead of surrender." Chen looked at her screen, where complex algorithms were processing electromagnetic data from around the globe. "Understood, sir. I will not be wrong." The next 8 hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. Chen coordinated with radar operators on 6 continents, walking them through modifications to their detection equipment. She worked with technicians in Australia, engineers in Britain, and radar operators in Japan, all of them making the same delicate adjustments to their systems. With 4 hours remaining until the surrender deadline, Chen achieved the first confirmed tracking lock on a phased alien vessel over Moscow. The ship had phased out of visual detection to avoid Russian interceptors, but Chen's modified radar systems tracked its movement through dimensional space. 2 hours later, installations worldwide had confirmed similar tracking capabilities. For the first time since the alien arrival, humans could see exactly where the Krillian ships were at all times, regardless of their phase state. Chen compiled her data and sent it directly to General Morrison with a simple message. "Sir, they can hide from our eyes, but they cannot hide from our minds. Recommend we decline their generous offer." 1 hour before the surrender deadline, President Harrison received a briefing that changed the course of human history. A single Air Force colonel had accomplished what the combined military leadership of the world had thought impossible. She had found a way to see through alien deception, but seeing the enemy was only the beginning of Sarah Chen's plan. As world leaders delayed the surrender announcement and demanded more time to consider their options, Chen was already working on Phase 2 of her strategy. Tracking the aliens was useful, but tracking them was not enough to stop them. For that, she needed to understand exactly how their phase technology worked. Chen pulled up 3 days' worth of tracking data and began looking for patterns in alien behavior. The ships followed specific routes during their intimidation flights. They avoided certain atmospheric conditions. Most importantly, they required 17 minutes of normal spaceflight between each phase transition. The limitations suggested that their phase drive needed time to recharge between uses. Chen cross-referenced this with energy signature data and found her confirmation. The alien phase drives were incredibly sophisticated, but they were not unlimited. They required massive energy input and had definite operational constraints. If human forces could force the aliens into repeated phase transitions, they could drain the energy reserves of the alien ships and leave them vulnerable to conventional attack. Chen smiled for the first time in 3 days. The Krillian Empire had assumed that superior technology guaranteed easy victory. They had not considered that humans might be smart enough to turn that technology into a weakness. Admiral Zeketh was becoming increasingly annoyed with human behavior. The surrender deadline had passed 6 hours ago, and instead of capitulation, he was receiving reports of unusual electromagnetic activity across the planet. Human radar installations were operating at maximum power and had apparently undergone significant modifications in an impossibly short time. "They are trying to track our vessels," Voss reported, his voice uncertain. "Somehow they have found a way to partially penetrate our phase shielding." Zeketh dismissed the concern with a wave of his hand. "Primitive efforts by a desperate species. Even if they can track us, their weapons cannot harm our ships. Begin Phase 2. Destroy 3 of their major cities to demonstrate our power. That will end their foolish resistance." But as Krillian attack squadrons moved toward their targets, they encountered something unexpected. Human military forces were tracking their movements with perfect accuracy, forcing the alien ships to phase shift repeatedly to avoid surface-to-air missiles and interceptor aircraft. The human weapons could not penetrate Krillian shields, but the constant phase transitions were draining power reserves faster than anticipated. What should have been a simple demonstration of superior firepower was becoming an exhausting game of hide-and-seek with increasingly aggressive human forces. Zeketh watched his tactical displays with growing confusion. The humans were not fighting to win, they were fighting to learn. Every engagement revealed more information about Krillian capabilities, and somehow the humans were using that information to become more effective with each encounter. In her underground command center, Colonel Sarah Chen monitored the global engagement with satisfaction. Human forces were performing exactly as she had hoped. They could not win direct confrontations with alien ships, but they did not need to win. They just needed to gather data and force the aliens to exhaust their technological advantages. Chen was already working on Phase 3 of her strategy. The aliens had revealed far more about their capabilities than they realized, and Chen was beginning to understand exactly how their technology worked. The Krillian Empire had conquered 47 worlds using the same tactics: superior technology, psychological intimidation, and overwhelming force. They assumed that the same approach would work on Earth. They had not considered that they might encounter a species that fought with their minds instead of their weapons. They had never faced an enemy that turned superior technology into a liability. Most critically, they had never encountered Colonel Sarah Chen. The real battle was just beginning. Admiral Zeketh stared at the tactical display in growing disbelief. What should have been a simple destruction of 3 human cities had turned into a prolonged engagement that had already lasted 14 hours. His attack squadrons reported increasing difficulty maintaining phase capabilities due to constant energy drain from repeated transitions. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "These primitives do not possess weapons capable of threatening our vessels." Commander Voss reviewed the latest reports with obvious concern. "They are not trying to destroy our ships, Admiral. They are forcing us to exhaust our phase drives. Every time we decloak to attack a target, human forces immediately converge on our position with perfect accuracy. We must phase shift to avoid their primitive missiles, but the constant transitions are depleting our energy reserves." Zeketh felt something he had never experienced in 47 previous conquests: uncertainty. The humans were not fighting like any species the Krillian Empire had encountered before. They were not attempting to match Krillian technology or win through superior firepower. Instead, they seemed to be learning from every engagement and adapting their tactics in real time. "Order all attack squadrons to withdraw to orbital positions," Zeketh commanded. "We will bombard their population centers from space, beyond the range of their primitive aircraft." But as the Krillian ships pulled back to higher altitudes, they encountered another surprise. Human satellites, previously dismissed as primitive communication devices, suddenly activated sophisticated jamming systems that interfered with Krillian targeting sensors. The jamming signals used the exact same frequencies that Krillian scouts had observed humans using for their crude internet communications. The humans had weaponized their own primitive technology. In her command center, Colonel Chen watched the orbital withdrawal with satisfaction. "Phase 3 is working perfectly," she reported to General Morrison. "We have forced them into predictable behavior patterns. Now we can implement the real strategy." Over the past 18 hours, Chen had done far more than develop alien tracking systems. She had assembled the most comprehensive analysis of Krillian capabilities ever compiled by human intelligence. Every engagement had revealed new information about alien technology, tactics, and limitations. The Krillians used energy-based weapons that required direct line of sight to their targets. Their ships relied heavily on phase technology for defense, but the phase drives had a 17-minute recharge cycle and limited energy capacity. Their targeting systems operated on specific frequency bands that could be disrupted by properly tuned interference. Most importantly, Chen had identified the one weakness that made everything else possible. The Krillians were overconfident. They had conquered so many worlds using the same tactics that they had become predictable. They expected fear, confusion, and quick surrender from primitive species. They did not expect a coordinated global response directed by someone who had spent 15 years studying exactly how to defeat superior military forces. "General," Chen continued, "I need authorization to implement the final phase of our strategy. It will require coordination with every military force on the planet and the temporary shutdown of most civilian communication systems." Morrison's voice was tense. "Colonel, we are hanging by a thread here. The aliens have pulled back to orbital positions and could glass our major cities at any moment." "What exactly do you have in mind?" Chen pulled up a global map showing hundreds of marked positions. "Sir, we are going to give the Krillians exactly what they expect from a primitive species. We are going to surrender." The silence on the communication line stretched for nearly 30 seconds. "Explain," Morrison finally said. "Admiral Zeketh has been following standard Krillian conquest protocols based on their previous campaigns. They intimidate, they demonstrate superior firepower, and when the local population becomes sufficiently terrified, they accept surrender and begin occupation procedures." Chen highlighted specific positions on her map. "The Krillians will expect our surrender to be delivered by our highest-ranking officials in major population centers. They will position their ships over those centers to oversee the formal submission process. When they do, they will be exactly where we want them. Colonel, if this goes wrong, We are handing them our leadership and our most populous cities. Chen looked at her displays, where tracking systems continued to monitor every alien vessel in Earth's vicinity. General, 3 days ago, these aliens thought they were facing a primitive species that barely understood space travel. They still think that. They are about to learn that the most dangerous thing about humans is not our technology. It is our ability to think 3 steps ahead of anyone who underestimates us. Within 6 hours, every major world leader was broadcasting the same message on all frequencies. Humanity formally surrendered to the Krillian Empire. The surrender would be signed by United Nations representatives in 12 major cities simultaneously. Krillian representatives were invited to witness the ceremonies and begin occupation procedures. Admiral Zeketh received the surrender broadcasts with immense relief. The human resistance had been more troublesome than expected, but the outcome was the same as always. Superior technology and persistent pressure had broken the primitive species' will to fight. "Deploy occupation squadrons to the specified cities," he ordered. "Standard protocol. Maintain phase capability until all human military forces have been secured." As Krillian ships descended toward Earth's major population centers, their crews prepared for the familiar routine of accepting surrender from another conquered world. The unusual human tactics of the past 3 days were forgotten in the satisfaction of another successful campaign. They had no idea that Colonel Sarah Chen was tracking their every movement from her underground command center, coordinating a response that would redefine the Krillian Empire's understanding of primitive species. The surrender ceremonies were scheduled to begin simultaneously in New York, London, Moscow, Beijing, Tokyo, Delhi, Cairo, Sydney, Johannesburg, Mexico City, São Paulo, and Los Angeles. As Krillian ships took positions over each city, they maintained standard defensive formations and kept their phase drives on standby. Chen watched the aliens settle into position with grim satisfaction. The Krillians were creatures of habit, and their habits were about to become their downfall. "All stations, this is Control," she broadcast on secure military frequencies. "Initiate Operation Lighthouse in 30 seconds. Around the globe, military installations that had been secretly modified over the past 72 hours came online simultaneously. Every radar installation, every communication array, and every satellite uplink on the planet suddenly began broadcasting at maximum power on a single, carefully calculated frequency. The frequency that caused catastrophic resonance in Krillian phase drive systems. Admiral Zeketh felt his flagship shudder as electromagnetic interference unlike anything in Krillian experience flooded every system on his ship. Emergency alerts flashed across his displays as the phase drive began experiencing cascade failures. "Report!" he shouted over the growing alarm sounds. "Admiral, we are receiving massive electromagnetic interference from the planet's surface," Voss called out. "The humans have turned their entire global communication network into a coordinated jamming system. Our phase drives are experiencing critical overload." On Zeketh's tactical display, similar reports were coming in from all 12 occupation squadrons. The humans had not surrendered at all. They had lured Krillian ships into predetermined positions and then activated a planet-wide trap that was simultaneously disrupting every alien vessel in Earth's atmosphere. The Krillians tried to phase shift to safety, but the massive electromagnetic interference prevented proper dimensional transition. Their ships remained locked in normal space, their primary defensive capability completely neutralized. That was when the humans revealed the true scope of their strategy. Hidden military installations around the globe suddenly opened fire with weapons the Krillians had never seen before. The humans had spent the past 3 days not just learning about alien technology, but adapting their own weapons based on that knowledge. Surface-to-air missiles equipped with electromagnetic pulse warheads homed in on alien ships with perfect accuracy, guided by the global tracking network Chen had established. The EMP warheads did not need to penetrate Krillian shields. They just needed to add to the electromagnetic chaos that was already crippling alien systems. High-powered laser installations, hastily converted from industrial cutting tools, began targeting alien ships with concentrated energy beams. The lasers could not destroy Krillian vessels, but they could overload already stressed systems and force emergency power diversions. Most devastating of all, human forces had weaponized the aliens' own technology against them. Chen had calculated that sustained electromagnetic interference would cause Krillian phase drives to attempt automatic emergency activation. The drives would burn out their own power systems, trying to establish dimensional transitions that the interference made impossible. The humans were forcing the aliens to destroy themselves. Admiral Zeketh watched in horror as his invasion fleet began experiencing cascading system failures. Ships that had conquered 47 worlds were being defeated by primitive weapons wielded by a species that barely understood space travel. "All squadrons, emergency retreat to orbital positions," he ordered. "Maximum acceleration, abandon occupation protocol." But as Krillian ships attempted to climb above the electromagnetic interference, they encountered one final surprise. The humans had prepared for retreat attempts. High-altitude aircraft, previously dismissed as primitive atmospheric craft, had been secretly fitted with electromagnetic pulse missiles and were waiting at the edge of space. The human aircraft could not match alien performance, but they did not need to. They just needed to maintain the electromagnetic interference as alien ships tried to escape. Every time a Krillian vessel climbed toward space, human interceptors forced it to remain within the interference zone. Colonel Chen watched the tactical display as her carefully planned operation unfolded with mechanical precision. 12 Krillian squadrons were trapped in Earth's atmosphere, their primary weapons and defensive systems crippled by coordinated electromagnetic warfare. "All stations, initiate Phase 2 of Operation Lighthouse," she commanded. The electromagnetic interference suddenly stopped. For a moment, Krillian crews thought they had been given a reprieve. Emergency systems began coming back online. Phase drives started their recharge sequences. Then the humans attacked with conventional weapons. Fighter jets from dozens of nations converged on alien ships whose shields and defensive systems were still recovering from electromagnetic assault. Surface-to-air missiles saturated the airspace around major cities. Artillery batteries that had been pre-positioned around surrender ceremony sites opened fire with armor-piercing rounds. The alien ships were still technologically superior to anything humans possessed, but technology meant nothing when systems were offline and crews were struggling to regain control of damaged vessels. Admiral Zeketh felt his flagship rock under the impact of primitive kinetic weapons that should not have been able to penetrate Krillian armor. But his shields were still offline, his weapon systems were experiencing power fluctuations, and his phase drive was completely non-functional. "Admiral," Voss reported, his voice tight with panic, "we are receiving massive battle damage. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. Main power is at 30%. Phase drive will not be operational for at least 2 hours." Around the globe, similar reports were coming in from all occupation squadrons. The Krillian invasion fleet, which had seemed invincible just hours earlier, was being systematically destroyed by coordinated attacks from primitive human forces. Zeketh realized that he had made a critical error in judgment. The humans had not been fighting to win individual engagements. They had been fighting to gather intelligence for a single, devastating counterattack. Every phase transition, every weapon discharge, every tactical maneuver had been carefully observed and analyzed by human forces. The primitives had been studying him. "Emergency transmission to all Krillian vessels," Zeketh commanded. "Full retreat. Abandon occupation. Return to mothership immediately." But as his communications officer attempted to send the retreat order, he discovered that human jamming systems were still active. The electromagnetic interference had stopped just long enough to allow human weapons to target alien ships, but communication frequencies remained blocked. The Krillians were trapped in Earth's atmosphere, cut off from their command structure and under sustained attack from forces that seemed to anticipate their every move. Colonel Chen had spent 15 years learning how to defeat superior military technology. She had studied every successful asymmetric warfare campaign in human history. She understood that technological superiority meant nothing if the enemy could control the terms of engagement. The Krillians had assumed that superior technology guaranteed victory. They had not considered that humans might be smart enough to turn superior technology into a liability. As Chen watched alien ships struggling to maintain altitude under sustained conventional attack, she opened a communication channel to Admiral Zeketh on the same frequency the aliens had used for their original surrender demand. Admiral Zeketh, this is Colonel Sarah Chen of the United States Air Force. You are surrounded by coordinated military forces from every major nation on Earth. Your ships are damaged, your defensive systems are compromised, and your retreat route is blocked. I am prepared to offer you the same terms you offered us. Surrender your vessels and submit to integration into human civilization or face total destruction. The communication channel remained silent for several minutes. When Zeketh finally responded, his voice carried none of the arrogance that had characterized his original demands. Human Chen, how did you know we would position our ships over your surrender ceremonies? Chen smiled as she looked at her tactical displays, where human forces maintained perfect coordination despite using technology the aliens had dismissed as primitive. Admiral, you have conquered 47 worlds using exactly the same tactics. You always position ships over major population centers during surrender ceremonies. You always maintain standard defensive formations. You always keep phase drives on standby for quick retreat. Chen paused to let that information sink in. The problem with superior technology, Admiral, is that it makes you predictable. You stopped learning how to adapt because your technology always gave you the advantage. We humans have never had that luxury. We have always had to be smarter than our enemies because we could never be stronger than them. As if to emphasize her point, human forces around the globe continued their coordinated attack. Alien ships that had seemed invincible were being systematically disabled by primitive weapons guided by superior tactics and perfect intelligence. The Krillian Empire had encountered something it had never faced before, a species that fought with their minds instead of their technology, an enemy that turned superior capabilities into weaknesses, an adversary that had spent their entire history learning how to defeat forces that should have been able to crush them easily. Admiral Zeketh looked at his tactical displays and realized that the Krillian Empire's conquest of Earth was over before it had truly begun. But the human Colonel Chen was not finished with her demonstration of primitive intelligence. Admiral Zeketh stared at the holographic display showing the catastrophic status of his invasion fleet. 12 squadrons reduced to barely functional hulks drifting in Earth's atmosphere. Phase drives completely offline. Communication with the mothership blocked by sophisticated jamming that primitive humans should not have been capable of creating. In 47 previous conquests, nothing like this had ever happened. Superior Krillian technology had always guaranteed victory within days, sometimes hours. The thought that a primitive species could not only resist, but actually defeat the Krillian Empire seemed impossible. Yet here he was, trapped above a world that barely understood space travel. His entire invasion force crippled by coordinated attacks from weapons that belonged in a museum. Admiral, Commander Voss reported, his voice barely steady. Squadron 7 reports complete propulsion failure. Squadron 3 has lost all weapons systems. Squadron 11 is requesting emergency evacuation due to multiple hull breaches. Zeketh closed his eyes. The unthinkable was happening. The Krillian Empire was about to suffer its first military defeat in 3 centuries, defeated by humans. The communication channel crackled as Colonel Chen's voice returned. Admiral Zeketh, I am still waiting for your response to my surrender offer. While you consider your options, perhaps I should clarify your current situation. Chen's tactical display showed the complete picture of the battle. Every alien ship was tracked. Every system failure was monitored, and every escape route was blocked by coordinated human forces. Your 12 occupation squadrons are no longer combat effective. Your communication with the Krillian mothership has been severed. Your phase drives will require a minimum of 6 hours to return to operational status, assuming we permit your technical crews to make repairs. Chen paused, allowing the implications to sink in. More importantly, Admiral, we have been monitoring your mothership's position since before you arrived in our system. Our deep space tracking network has been observing Krillian fleet movements for the past month. We know exactly where your command vessel is located, and we know its tactical capabilities. Zekith felt something cold settle in his stomach. Impossible. Our mothership is positioned beyond the range of primitive human detection systems. Admiral, 3 days ago you made the mistake of underestimating human intelligence. Do not compound that error by underestimating human technology. Chen pulled up astronomical data on her screens. For the past month, human space agencies had been secretly coordinating with military forces to track the Krillian fleet's approach. Telescopes around the globe had been modified with enhanced sensors. Satellite networks had been reprogrammed for deep space observation. Radio telescopes had been converted into long-range detection arrays. The Krillians had assumed that primitive human space technology could not threaten vessels operating beyond the solar system. They had been wrong. We have been watching you since you entered our outer solar system, Chen continued. We know that your mothership carries approximately 40,000 Krillian personnel. We know its exact position relative to Jupiter's orbital path. We know its energy signature, its defensive capabilities, and its escape vectors. Chen's voice carried a cold certainty that made Zekith's blood freeze. Most importantly, Admiral, we know that your mothership is completely defenseless against the weapon system we deployed 6 hours ago. Around Jupiter's orbit, a formation of objects that Krillian sensors had dismissed as primitive space debris was coming to life. The objects had been launched weeks earlier by human space agencies working in unprecedented coordination, crude by Krillian standards, but perfectly adequate for their intended purpose. Nuclear-powered kinetic impactors, asteroid miners hastily converted into weapons of mass destruction, simple, primitive, and absolutely devastating when deployed in sufficient numbers against an unprepared target. Admiral, Chen said, in approximately 4 hours, 67 kinetic impactors will reach your mothership's position. Each impactor carries the kinetic energy equivalent of a small nuclear weapon. They are too small for your sensors to detect until the final moments before impact, and they are approaching from multiple vectors that make interception impossible. Zekith stared at his displays in growing horror. You would not dare attack our mothership. If you destroy our command vessel, the Krillian Empire will send battle fleets to sterilize your entire world. Will they? Chen asked. Admiral, let me share some intelligence that your empire apparently never gathered about human psychology. When humans are faced with extinction, we do not surrender. We fight harder. If the Krillian Empire wants to sterilize Earth, they are welcome to try. But they should understand what they will be fighting. Chen's voice carried a conviction that cut through Zekith's certainty like a blade. We are a species that has spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of war against superior enemies. We have fought with sticks against steel, with arrows against guns, with courage against impossible odds. We have never had superior technology, Admiral. We have always had to be smarter, faster, and more determined than whatever tried to destroy us. Around Earth, human military forces maintained their coordinated assault on the crippled Krillian squadrons. Fighter jets from nations that had been enemies just days earlier flew in perfect formation. Artillery batteries from opposing military forces coordinated their fire with mechanical precision. Surface-to-air missiles from every major power on Earth shared targeting data through networks that spanned the globe. Do you see the coordination, Admiral? Do you understand what you are witnessing? This is not just military technology. This is human civilization working as a single entity for the first time in our history. Every nation, every military force, every intelligence agency on this planet is now united against a common threat. Chen's analysis was absolutely accurate. The Krillian invasion had accomplished something that centuries of human diplomacy had failed to achieve. For the first time in human history, every major world power was working together with perfect coordination and shared purpose. You have given us the greatest gift possible, Chen continued. You have shown us that we are not alone in the universe and that our survival depends on unity. When your invasion is over, Admiral, we will still have that unity. We will still have that coordination. And we will still remember exactly how to defeat technologically superior enemies. Zeketh realized that the human was describing something far worse than military defeat. The Krillian invasion had not just failed. It had created a unified human civilization that would be exponentially more dangerous than the divided species the Empire had expected to conquer. Colonel Chen, he said finally, what are your surrender terms? Chen smiled as she looked at displays showing the complete success of Operation Lighthouse. Unconditional surrender of all Krillian personnel currently in Earth space, full disclosure of Krillian technology, star charts, and intelligence regarding other species in the local galactic region, immediate recall of your kinetic impactors before they reach your mothership. In exchange, we will provide medical assistance to your injured personnel, allow peaceful repatriation of Krillian survivors, and establish diplomatic relations with the Krillian Empire based on mutual respect and equality. Zeketh laughed bitterly. Mutual respect and equality? You have just destroyed an invasion fleet and threatened to annihilate our mothership. Why would you offer peaceful resolution? Because, Admiral, humans understand something that the Krillian Empire has apparently forgotten. Victory is not about destroying your enemies. Victory is about making them realize that they never should have underestimated you in the first place. Chen pulled up star charts showing the local galactic region. We know that the Krillian Empire controls 47 conquered worlds. We know that those worlds were inhabited by species that you defeated using the same tactics you attempted here. We also know that every one of those species is now watching to see what happens when the mighty Krillian Empire encounters a species that refuses to be conquered. The implications hit Zeketh like a physical blow. If word spread through the Empire's conquered territories that a primitive species had defeated Krillian forces, it could trigger uprisings on dozens of worlds. The Empire's entire structure depended on the belief that Krillian technology made resistance futile. The choice is yours, Admiral, Chen continued. You can fight to the last ship and the last soldier, and we will destroy your mothership and broadcast the details of this engagement to every species within 50 light years. Or you can surrender honorably, work with us to establish peaceful contact, and help us understand how to coexist with other intelligent species. Chen's voice softened slightly. Admiral, we do not want to be your enemies. We want to learn from you, and we want you to learn from us. But we will not be conquered, subjugated, or dismissed as primitive. If the Krillian Empire can accept that humanity is an equal partner in galactic civilization, we can build something remarkable together. If not, we will fight you until one of our civilizations no longer exists. And based on the events of the past 3 days, I believe you understand which civilization is more likely to survive that conflict. Zeketh looked at his tactical displays one final time. 12 squadrons reduced to scrap metal. 40,000 personnel on the mothership facing imminent destruction. An invasion that was supposed to take days had turned into a disaster that threatened the foundation of the Empire itself. But more than that, he was looking at something the Krillian Empire had never encountered before. A species that fought with intelligence instead of strength. A civilization that turned disadvantages into advantages and weaknesses into strengths. A people who had spent their entire evolutionary history learning how to survive against impossible odds. The humans had not just defeated Krillian technology, they had demonstrated that technological superiority was meaningless against tactical superiority, strategic thinking, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for survival. "Colonel Chen," Zekith said quietly, "I formally surrender all Krillian forces in Earth space to human authority. We request immediate cancellation of your kinetic impactor attack and the opening of diplomatic channels between our civilizations." Around the globe, human military forces received stand-down orders as alien ships powered down their weapons and began emergency surface landings. The first interplanetary war in human history had lasted exactly 73 hours and had ended in complete human victory. But for Colonel Sarah Chen, the real work was just beginning. Over the following weeks, as human scientists studied Krillian technology and human diplomats established contact with other species in the local galactic region, Chen found herself at the center of the most important negotiations in human history. The Krillians, it turned out, were not the most powerful force in local space. They were simply the most aggressive. Dozens of species had been watching the invasion of Earth, expecting to see another world fall to Krillian expansion. Instead, they had witnessed something unprecedented. A primitive species had not just resisted conquest, but had defeated their conquerors so thoroughly that the Krillian Empire was forced to fundamentally reconsider its approach to interspecies relations. Within 6 months, the Krillian Empire had begun negotiations for the peaceful independence of 12 of its conquered worlds. Other advanced species that had avoided contact with aggressive neighbors began reaching out to humanity through diplomatic channels. The balance of power in local galactic space shifted dramatically in favor of cooperation over conquest. Chen found herself appointed as the first director of the Earth Interspecies Contact Division, responsible for managing humanity's relationships with 43 different alien civilizations. It was a job that required exactly the same skills she had used to defeat the Krillian invasion. Understanding enemy capabilities, predicting their behavior, and staying several steps ahead of anyone who might underestimate human intelligence. The Krillians had made one critical error in judgment. They had assumed that technological superiority meant automatic victory. They had never considered that a species could be dangerous not because of what they could build, but because of how they could think. Admiral Zekith, now serving as the Krillian Empire's ambassador to Earth, had learned to respect human intelligence in a way that few members of his species could understand. During his frequent meetings with Chen, he often reflected on the lesson that had cost his empire its reputation for invincibility. "Colonel Chen," he said during one of their regular diplomatic sessions, "I have spent considerable time studying human history since our surrender. Your species has a remarkable record of defeating superior enemies through tactical innovation and strategic thinking." Chen nodded. "We have had lots of practice, Admiral. When you are never the strongest, you learn to be the smartest. I believe that is why the Krillian Empire made such a fundamental error in our approach to Earth," Zekith continued. "We had become accustomed to automatic victory through technological advantage. We had forgotten that intelligence and determination could be more powerful than advanced weapons." Chen smiled as she looked out the window of her office. Where human and alien technicians worked together on joint research projects that were advancing both civilizations faster than either could have progressed alone. "Admiral, the most dangerous thing about humans is not our technology or our weapons or our willingness to fight. The most dangerous thing about humans is that we never stop learning. Every defeat teaches us how to win the next battle. Every victory shows us how to avoid the mistakes that led to past defeats. Chen turned back to face the Krillian ambassador. Your empire made the mistake of thinking that humans were just another primitive species to be conquered. You never considered that we might be the species that changes how conquest works in this galaxy. Zeketh nodded slowly. The human was absolutely correct. The Krillian invasion of Earth had not just failed. It had fundamentally altered the relationship between technological superiority and military victory throughout local space. Other species had learned that resistance to advanced civilizations was not futile. Advanced civilizations had learned that primitive species could be far more dangerous than their technology suggested. The entire balance of galactic politics had shifted because one human colonel had refused to accept that surrender was the only option. "Colonel," Zeketh said, "what will humans do now that you have established yourselves as a major power in local galactic space?" Chen smiled. "The same thing we have always done, Admiral. We will learn everything we can, prepare for whatever challenges come next, and make sure that no one ever again makes the mistake of underestimating human intelligence." As Zeketh left Chen's office and returned to his embassy, he reflected on the lesson that had cost the Krillian Empire its dominance over local space. Superior technology meant nothing if your enemy could think faster than you could adapt. The humans had proven that the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy was not advanced technology or overwhelming firepower. The most dangerous weapon was a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history learning how to survive against superior enemies. The Krillian Empire had assumed success until a single name defied them. Colonel Sarah Chen had shown them that assumptions were the most dangerous weakness any civilization could possess. And throughout the galaxy, other species were learning that lesson as well.